There are certain behaviors that simply cannot be faked, especially when they come from the unconscious. When a man is truly falling in love, his behavior changes, not because he decides to change, but because something deeper within him begins to emerge. This is where Carl Jung's analytical psychology offers us a clear view of the hidden yet revealing signs of a feeling being born without him even realizing it. Small gestures, glances that linger longer than usual, a presence more constant than necessary. All of these are signals his unconscious is shouting, even if his rational mind is still silent. If you've ever wondered whether he is falling for you, the answer may lie in the attitudes he himself is unaware of. Leave in the comments, "I recognize the signs of the unconscious." In Jungian psychology, the deepest feelings are not expressed only through words. They emerge from unconscious layers, escaping through spontaneous actions and behaviors. When a man is falling in love without realizing it, his unconscious begins to project onto the other person inner aspects that long to be integrated. This phenomenon is known as projection, and it occurs when he sees in someone else qualities that actually belong to his own psyche, often connected to the figure of the anima, the archetype of the feminine within the man. The anima represents sensitivity, care, emotion, and emotional connection. When a man falls in love, it is as if this archetype is activated, bringing forth behaviors he hasn't rationalized. He becomes more protective, more present, more attentive, not as a conscious strategy, but as a reflection of an inner process of individuation. This process of individuation, the path of integrating all aspects of the personality, leads the individual to recognize parts of himself in the other. And when this integration begins through affection, the shadow, the rejected or unknown contents, also starts to surface. That is why he may swing between enchantment and confusion, between wanting closeness and fearing exposure. Passion that arises unconsciously is therefore a mirror of the soul. He is not only approaching you, without realizing it, he is approaching himself. Understanding these signs through Jung's perspective allows us not only to interpret actions, but to see the inner movement that generates them, and this completely changes the way we perceive love. When a man begins to genuinely fall in love, there is an inner movement that comes before any conscious decision. Carl Jung's analytical psychology teaches us that within every man there exists a feminine archetype called the anima, a collection of images, emotions, intuitions, and traits that represent the feminine aspect of his psyche. This archetype is built throughout life, shaped by his relationship with his mother, with other significant women, and by emotional experiences over time. The anima remains, for the most part, in the unconscious, but when love starts to arise, it becomes activated. And it is at this point that involuntary gestures become revealing. He begins to seek your presence in subtle ways, trying to prolong conversations without realizing, offering help spontaneously, remembering details you never imagined he noticed. This happens because he is not only responding to who you are, but to an inner image, a sense of emotional familiarity that touches him deeply. These gestures are not strategies, not calculated. They are expressions of the unconscious trying to establish connection. A man who is beginning to fall in love shows signs of vulnerability that even he might not understand. His gaze softens, his body language changes in your presence. He shows interest in how you are even without apparent reason. He may even display a slight anxiety, a desire to please, to be around, without being able to explain why. This strong presence of the anima moves him beyond logic or mere physical desire. He may not say directly what he feels, may even deny it to himself, but his actions reveal him. Suddenly, he finds himself wanting to hear your opinion on matters he has never shared with anyone. He may even adjust small routines to fit time with you. It is not rational, it is archetypal. The anima works as a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. When a woman awakens this archetype in a man, she activates in him not only attraction, but also a search for completeness. And that is why his gestures are not only about desire, but about an inner movement towards psychic balance. Without knowing, he is trying to integrate aspects of himself that he recognizes symbolically in you. This activation is not only about the romantic content of the relationship, but about the symbolic resonance you represent. On deeper levels, he feels there is something in you that speaks to him, but not in words. It speaks to his soul, And this speech translates into small but meaningful acts: an untimely compliment, a simple message at an unexpected moment, a comfortable silence when you are together. Often the man himself gets confused. He may think he is just being kind or that he is acting as a friend. But if we look through a Jungian lens, we see these behaviors carry a stronger emotional weight than he is consciously able to admit. He starts to transform without knowing why. This is not about manipulation or trying to win someone over. These gestures are spontaneous because they are born from a psychic need to reconnect with what is absent in himself. When he meets a woman who symbolizes his anima, even partially, he is drawn not only to her outer figure, but to what she represents internally. And without realizing it, he begins to act driven by this connection. Noticing these signs requires sensitivity. They are not theatrical displays nor empty promises. They are silent, consistent, sometimes barely perceptible actions that point to inner transformation. If he begins to become a more sensitive, more present, more connected version of himself, it is because the anima is making itself heard, and you are the mirror reflecting this inner call. These unconscious gestures are not the final confirmation of love, but they are its seed, a seed that sprouts without him knowing he planted it, and that grows through what he does, without knowing why he does it. When a man begins to fall in love, he is not just getting to know a woman. He is encountering an inner image, the unconscious ideal of femininity that inhabits his psyche. This process is known in Carl Jung's analytical psychology as projection. Projection is not a mistake, nor a romantic illusion. It is an inevitable stage of the love experience, especially when it arises spontaneously and unconsciously. Projection means that he is, without realizing it, placing onto you attributes that belong to an inner model, qualities he seeks to integrate in himself, but which he does not yet recognize as part of his own essence. That is why, when he feels growing emotional closeness, he is really feeling attraction for this inner image you reflect. It is not a game of illusion, but a natural movement of the psyche in search of wholeness. This feminine ideal, what Jung called the anima, carries elements such as empathy, creativity, intuition, sensitivity, care, symbolic beauty, and emotional depth. When you awaken this content in him, he begins to see you with a different intensity, not because of something specific you do, but because of the way you internally resonate with what he needs to discover in himself. And it is here that emotional connection becomes stronger than any physical attraction. He may not understand why he trusts you so much, or why he feels safe opening up without fear. He may be surprised to find himself comfortable exposing his weaknesses, insecurities, and most intimate thoughts. This emotional openness is a direct reflection of the anima projection. You embody effortlessly a figure that connects him with his deeper, hidden side. The closeness is not just with you, it is with an essential aspect of himself now rising to the surface. The intensity of this bond, however, can cause confusion. He may feel enchanted, inspired, yet simultaneously afraid of losing control. This is because projection, by nature, temporarily unsettles the ego. He is seeing in you something he longs for deeply, but does not yet comprehend within himself. That is why emotional closeness can be accompanied by both fascination and unease. At this point, he starts seeking your presence more often. He looks for you not only to share moments, but to feel more complete. His words become more personal, his messages more intimate, his invitations more meaningful. He begins to build an emotional bridge, not based only on affinity, but on the attempt to touch this inner ideal projected onto you. However, this process also carries a challenge. Projection is unconscious and tends to idealize. He may see in you a perfection that does not exist, and when reality inevitably appears, this ideal begins to dissolve. It is at this point many bonds become destabilized. But if the man is able to recognize that what he saw in you is in fact a reflection of what is inside him, the bond can mature. Projection dissolves, making way for real connection. When passion is born from projection, it is intense but unstable. When it evolves into a conscious relationship, it becomes deep and transformative. The key lies in understanding that you are not the fantasy he created, but the mirror that reflected something valuable for his inner process. That is why true emotional closeness is not measured by the time spent together, but by the depth of what is shared, by silences that are not uncomfortable, by confidences that seek no judgment, by glances that say more than words. This type of connection does not arise by chance. It is a sign you have activated something significant within him, something that brings him closer to himself. While he remains unaware of this, he will continue to act impulsively, seeking closeness, wanting to please without knowing why. But you, with the lens of Jungian thought, can recognize these gestures as much more than signs of interest. They are silent revelations that he is being touched by something from the depths of his soul, and that this soul has found, in you, a reflection of what is most genuine within him. When a man begins to fall in love unconsciously, driven by inner forces he does not yet understand, it is common for his behavior to swing between intense closeness and sudden withdrawal. This seemingly contradictory movement is a direct reflection of the shadow, one of the central concepts of Carl Jung's analytical psychology. The shadow represents everything the individual rejects, represses, or does not recognize in himself. And when love begins to emerge, it also starts to illuminate hidden parts of the psyche, revealing fears, insecurities, and inner conflicts. At first, he may appear completely devoted. He is present, available, emotionally engaged. His communication intensifies. He shows interest in your life, curiosity about your thoughts, and even gestures of care and protection that occur naturally. This is when the projection of the anima is in full force. He sees in you a reflection of something he deeply longs for, even if he is not fully aware. Yet, as emotional intimacy deepens, the shadow begins to manifest. The shadow does not appear as something negative in itself. It represents the unintegrated contents of the psyche. And when he begins to feel emotionally vulnerable, fears of abandonment, of overexposure, or even of unworthiness may surface. This can lead him to withdraw, to create emotional or even physical distance. The oscillation, therefore, is not a sign of disinterest. It is a symptom of inner conflict. He is being pulled between two poles, the desire to connect and the fear of losing control of his emotions. This duality shows that falling in love is neither simple nor linear. It involves not only meeting the other, but confronting oneself. When a man draws close to someone who deeply touches him, he is forced to look at himself, and in that gaze emerge parts he has avoided for a long time. He may begin to doubt his feelings, question his readiness, or even create rational obstacles to justify distancing himself. But deep down, he is dealing with his own shadow, parts of himself he has not yet learned to accept. These oscillations can be very confusing for the one on the other side. One day he seems warm and interested. The next he appears distant or cold. But through Jung's eyes, we understand this behavior is neither fickle nor calculated, but the result of an inner transformation. The shadow is active, and while he feels drawn to you, he also fears what that feeling awakens in him, the need to change, to grow, to confront his pain and fragility. Often the relationship with the anima, when projected onto a real person, forces the man to abandon old emotional defenses. The mask of independence, of self-control, of invulnerability begins to crack, and this can be frightening. Passion demands surrender, but the shadow cries for self-preservation. Thus, withdrawal emerges as an attempt to protect himself, even if it distances him from what he most desires. Understanding this dynamic is essential not to misinterpret his behavior. Oscillation is not a conscious choice, but an automatic emotional response to something that challenges him to transform. When a relationship touches the soul, it inevitably also touches the wounds he carries. And distancing is often an unconscious request for time, space, and inner reorganization. It does not mean he does not feel. On the contrary, he feels so much that he does not know how to handle it. The intensity of what he experiences may lead him to denial, to rationalize, or even to try ending the bond, to avoid diving deeply into himself. But even in withdrawal, the connection remains active, even if he does not voice it. That is why the best way to deal with this oscillation is not by forcing him to choose, but by understanding he is in the midst of individuation, a process where the shadow ceases to be an enemy and becomes an ally, if he is willing to face it. And this confrontation only happens when there is space for him to listen, to observe himself, and especially when there is someone who understands that true love also involves patience with the unconscious processes of the other. The oscillation between closeness and withdrawal seen through Jungian psychology, is not a flaw. It is a sign that something very real is happening. And if he can cross this dark field, he will find on the other side not only the possibility of a more mature bond, but also a fuller version of himself. Passion, when it arises genuinely and unexpectedly, is a portal. It opens a passage between the conscious world and the deeper layers of the psyche. For Carl Jung, nothing we feel intensely is separate from our individuation process, the path through which we become who we truly are, integrating every part of our personality, including those we avoid or do not know. And in this sense, passion reveals itself not only as an emotion, but as a powerful journey of self-discovery. When a man begins to fall in love without realizing it, he is in fact being drawn to a part of himself that is hidden, dormant, and now manifests through the image of another person. The desire to get closer, the enchantment with the other's presence, the impulse to reveal himself, all of this points to an inner search. He is not only interested in the woman before him, he is unconsciously trying to find something missing within himself. This is the beginning of individuation. The image projected onto the other, often idealized, brings to light qualities he needs to develop or accept: sensitivity, emotional openness, surrender, intuition, creativity. When he feels that this person completes him, he is being confronted with his unlived potential. Passion, in this context, becomes a symbolic, profoundly transformative experience that pushes him towards growth. But the path is not comfortable. Integrating unknown aspects of oneself requires confrontation. He must face his limitations, insecurities, fears of rejection, and even destructive relationship patterns. That is why passion can be as unsettling as it is enchanting. What was once a controlled existence now opens to the unpredictable, and in this movement he begins to see himself differently, more emotional, more reflective, more open to sensations he previously ignored. If this man is willing to observe himself, even in small steps, passion will become a revealing mirror. He will see it is not just about finding someone to fill a void, but about recognizing that the void points to neglected parts of himself. Connection with the other reveals the need for reconnection with oneself. This is the principle of individuation, integrating what is outside to transform what is inside. This journey, however, does not always follow a straight path. Many times he resists. The depth of passion may frighten him, and the urge to flee, to rationalize, or to reject the feeling arises as a defense. He tries to return to the known, to the safe, to self-control. But the emotional impact of the experience is already present and cannot be ignored. The image of the other person remains alive within him, not just as memory, but as symbol of what he needs to become. For Jung, meaningful encounters are always psychic. They do not occur only on the physical or emotional plane, but on the symbolic level. The other is a messenger of the unconscious. The person who awakens passion often represents the beginning of a crossing. She appears in that man's life not just as a potential partner, but as a catalyst of a process he needs to live, even if he does not yet understand it. If passion is lived consciously, even amidst confusion, it can become a great engine of personal evolution. It does not mean the relationship will necessarily last or unfold as idealized, but rather that this emotional experience, when understood deeply, has the power to reorganize his psyche. He begins to review his beliefs about love, his patterns of attachment, his way of relating to his own masculinity and to the world. The path of individuation is solitary by definition, but it is in deep encounters that it becomes visible. When a man finds himself transformed by the presence of someone who touches him authentically, he is being invited to look at himself. And if he accepts this call, he discovers that passion is not the end, it is the beginning. A beginning that does not depend on the other's permanence, but on the permanence of the meaning the other has awakened. In the end, true passion is not only about being with someone, it is about becoming someone more whole, more conscious, more in touch with one's own soul. Love, in this sense, ceases to be a destination and becomes a process, a symbolic journey back to what we are in essence. True love is not born only of sweet words or conscious promises. It sprouts from the depths of the psyche, in spontaneous gestures, in emotional contradictions, in silences heavy with meaning. When a man begins to fall in love without realizing it, he is starting an inner process that connects him with ancient images and archetypes, the anima, the shadow, the impulses of individuation. Every seemingly confusing or contradictory behavior is, in truth, a reflection of the transformation happening within him. He is not only getting to know someone, he is being called to know himself in a new, truer, and deeper way. Passion, when seen through the Jungian lens, ceases to be just a fleeting emotion and becomes a portal of awakening and integration. If you have made it this far, it is because you too are on this path of awareness, and that changes everything. Subscribe to the channel to keep diving into content that reveals the mysteries of the unconscious and the profound dynamics of relationships. And do not forget to watch the video on screen now. It is the next step in your journey of personal transformation. Love begins where control ends, and blossoms where inner truth is born.